Up the airy mountain, down the rushing glen, we daren't go a-hunting, for fear of little men. Mike Mignola's Hellboy is a series whose half-man, half-demon hero and mythical world embody the captivating essence of timeless myths of old, the outsized comic adventures of Jack Kirby, and the lyrical horror of H.P. Lovecraft. But Hellboy is distinctly Mignola, wearing its many direct influences on its sleeve while never feeling chained to them. Hellboy, the working man with a drinking problem and a dark destiny that may justify it, is the hammer come to smash ancient myths apart. But he too must play his part in larger myths to come. Hellboy, which debuted under Dark Horse Comics in 1993, is a series that slowly reveals itself to be about a man who continually rejects the destinies that others would place upon him, for both good and ill, shaping himself into the person he would want to be. Hellboy repeatedly denies his place in the world. Half demon, half man, Hellboy is prophesized to rule hell and destroy the earth. But being raised by Professor Trevor Broom has instilled Hellboy with a good heart that counters his demonic prophecies and the toll of a long, hard life that spans decades due to the hero's slow aging. Over the course of 20 years, Mike Mignola told Hellboy's story through myriad miniseries and one-shot comics, with sometimes years in between entries. A total of 57 issues comprise the Hellboy series, with another 10 detailing follow-up series Hellboy in Hell, and prequel series Hellboy and the BPRD ongoing at the time of this video's publication. It's a relatively small number of comics for a series told over such a breadth of time, and one that feels so mythically large. But these comics are intimately focused on Hellboy, and contrasted against a humongous world. You can compare it to the story of Odysseus. Like the Odyssey, we track one man across a vast, mythical landscape, encountering all manner of terrifying and wondrous creatures. To Hellboy, the encounters are run-of-the-mill. To the reader, they're wild and new. As Hellboy adventures around the globe, both reader and hero discover new things about this fantastical world and the demonic protagonist himself. While multi-issue arcs like Seed of Destruction or The Wild Hunt progress Mignola's story in major ways, especially toward the final chapters of Hellboy's tale as good and evil careen toward a climactic battle, it's the short stories of Hellboy that create a robust world and a series of encounters that come to define the character. They can embody a wide variety of tones and degrees of importance to the larger narrative. There's the two-page punchline of Pancakes, the origin revelation of the Chained Coffin, the seeds of an ongoing conflict in the Baba Yaga. The list goes on. But perhaps the best encapsulation of Hellboy the character, the storytelling strengths of Mignola, and the push and pull between light and dark that defines the mythical struggles of this series can be found in The Corpse. The Corpse is a slight story, possibly minor Hellboy when contrasted against some of the character's more epic tales. Hellboy doesn't change in any real way. In fact, Hellboy's growth as a character takes the length of the entire series, like a rock being carved by dripping water over the years. But this short tale is eventually revealed to be a linchpin within the series. The Corpse was originally published in 1995 in two-page installments from issues 75 through 82 of Advance Comics, and then collected as a single issue titled The Corpse and the Iron Shoes in 1996. Set in Ireland in the year 1959, The Corpse finds Hellboy arriving to help a couple that claims their baby girl has been stolen and replaced with a changeling, and while Hellboy soon ferrets out the creature, he's forced to complete a task to get the baby back from the fairy folk that kidnapped her. Get thee to the crossroads by the strike of middle night. Under the corpse tree, look you for 3 rough little men and do as they bid. He'll need to take the animated corpse of Tan O'Clany and give him a proper Christian burial by sunrise, or else he'll never find the child. Mignola uses this premise to propel the story forward quickly, with Hellboy visiting 4 different possible burial sites and finding lots of trouble along the way. It's a story largely based on the Irish folktale Teague O'Kane and the Corpse, with some additional folkloric elements sprinkled throughout. The original story follows a young man forced to carry a similarly reanimated dead body clutching his back in search of a permanent resting place. Like Hellboy, Teague journeys from place to place with no luck. Temple Damus, Carrick Fadvicaris, Emolgifada, Kilbreedia, no room for a body, driven away by the restless dead. Teague O'Kane is a changed man by the end of his story, maturing and settling down, the prodigal son with a corpse rather than a squandered inheritance. Hellboy isn't interested in learning anything, he's simply there to save a baby girl and shrug off the many weird occurrences he must endure along the way. But a world that hosts all manner of ancient prophecies and doomed creatures cannot be shrugged off forever. Mignola often adapted myths from numerous cultures to form the world of Hellboy and its stories. Some had already come to pass before the series began, Some were destined to happen before its end, and others made up the bones of the many adventures of Hellboy. But having the red right-handed hero at the center of these stories changes their very nature because of the hero's obstinate, modern attitude and nigh unkillable nature. Hellboy enters a piece of folklore and breaks it apart, dragging it into the modern day while Mignola applies comic book sensibilities to its storytelling. All the while, the folkloric nature of the tale remains intact, haunting and charming. It's easy to read The Corpse in its completed form without thinking of its original 2-page serialized format. The story feels cohesive, but that original presentation also added a propulsive nature still felt in its completed form. Serialized is the keyword here when it comes to Mignola's structural choices, as each 2-page installment has a mini-arc, complete with a rising action and climax that feeds directly into a cliffhanger akin to a movie serial. How will Hellboy get out of this one? Come back next week! Thankfully, Mignola wastes no time on story recap with each additional installment. If he had, The Corpse would have become tedious when collected. What we have instead is a comic with continually escalating stakes and a breakneck pace, racing from one devilish encounter to the next. Mignola's storytelling is prone to leaning on his visuals rather than overly wordy explanations. With Hellboy a seasoned pro and the inhabitants of this fantastical world having plenty of experience dealing with the supernatural, a detailed explanation of who each creature is would feel out of place. Avoiding explanation keeps the lived-in feeling of the world intact and heightens the sense of ancient, Gothic horror. To fill in the details, Mignola uses countless small panels that come between those that progress the story. These moments often focus on minutia, giving the impression of quiet horrors that peek out from darkened corners. It's a technique that can be highly effectual in moving a short story forward with very limited space, or creating atmosphere within a multi-issue arc. The world of Hellboy is one that exists in the shadows, and the tone of Mignola's work is one that impeccably blends with his artistic style. When the creatures that fill those shadows come to light, Mignola's sloping anatomy and deep lines often give them an ancient feeling, almost carved from stone. Even as he developed during the 80s, it was evident that Mignola had a penchant for the Gothic. This style crystallized before the creator even thought of Hellboy, but the horror fantasy world that surrounds his signature creation is one that allowed that style to take flight. Certainly, the angles and the shadows are very German, reflected Mignola in an interview with Juxtapose. It's very old German cinema. You see it in their poster art and in everything else. I never consciously said I wanted to do work like this, but it is the kind of stuff I've seen a lot of, and I think I respond to those kinds of shapes. Ever since the beginning of my career, I've used a lot of shadows, which is really just the way I render. It's always been stark black and white, and it's only gotten more starkly black and white over the years. While the character of Hellboy himself is one who approaches the supernatural with a modern, blue-collar worker attitude, which Mignola attributes to his father, his adventures almost always take place far away from any sign of the modern world. Whether it's 1940s-style pulp challenges, creeping Lovecraftian horror, or old-world fantasies, Hellboy comics happen on the periphery of modern society, within the creeping darkness at the edge of town, or waiting just outside your door. Within that darkness lurks all manner of fantastical beasts called from both ancient and modern mythology. While modern society has pushed them underground, these creatures nip at your heels and yearn to retake the world. In The Corpse, Mignola introduces the Dinashi into this world. These Irish fairies are the impetus of the story, having stolen young Alice Monaghan to raise as their own in an effort to keep fairykind alive. But they would become an increasingly important aspect of Hellboy's saga, watching and commenting on Hellboy's actions from afar with keen interest, and intersecting with him at key moments. The fairies may not have a future in a modern world that has stripped them of their power, but there may be no world at all depending on the choices Hellboy makes. The villains present throughout Mignola's work are often those who have lost power and are seeking to reassert themselves in the world by embracing darkness. In The Corpse, that hint of darkness has touched fairykind, who are losing their power and are relegated to the shadows. Desperation and humiliation by Hellboy has particularly enveloped Gruagach of Loch Lian, the changeling who took the baby's place and was burned with iron by the hero. Hellboy's trip across the countryside accompanies Gruagach's growing discontent, until the little creature seeks out vengeance. It's a Hellboy comic, so naturally that comes in the form of a giant pig monster. But also in typical Hellboy fashion, that act of vengeance is inverted in a moment of dry, dark humor. Gruagach is chomped by the beast, who is then beaten and shrunk by the hero. But it wouldn't be the end of Gruagach's story. He would return years later with his mind controlling the pig's body and in search of ultimate revenge. It's a plot thread that Mignola could have easily dropped, there was no need for the character to return. But in transforming Gruagach into a major antagonist and the spark that ignites the final clash of Hellboy's story, Mignola highlights the equal importance of his short stories within the grander narrative. It also underscores the recurring theme of Hellboy's decisions coming back to haunt him. It's been one of the real joys with this material to take characters who weren't meant to exist for more than a few pages, and see that those characters end up taking on these bigger lives. It's really fun to create these characters and give them enough room for them to evolve, in many cases, in directions we never expected. But it wouldn't be only Gruagach who would return. Baby Alice becomes a vital part of the climactic stories of the Wild Hunt, the Storm, and the Fury, now a grown woman in the modern day. Alice has a continued connection to fairy kind, and is one of the only people to get past Hellboy's gruff exterior. Not all of Hellboy's past choices hurt him. Hellboy becomes a better man because of Alice. At the end of its 17 pages, Hellboy has buried O'Clanny, and Alice has been returned. No tricks. The Dinishi have remained true to their word, but a leprechaun lets Hellboy know what will become of his people. Soon, I think, the king will gather us, and march us down into the shadows under the world where the old people go. Too late, the sons of Adam will cry, "Where are the children of the earth?" Gone. Look for, but you shall not find them. Weep, for they are gone forever. It's some unexpected weight for a story that plays fast and loose, a reflection of a world where light and dark battle for what little power remains. But for Hellboy, all that matters for now is the safety of little Alice. You're okay. I think somebody's going to be happy to see you. He'll come to learn of a deeper, darker fate soon enough.